Hello and welcome to Dream Job Ready. I'm Dane Sharp, I'm your host, and my guest today is Mike Cianciulli, who's a sports producer at the Red Bull Media House.
Please note that the opinions of guests are their own and not those of the companies they have worked for. This is Dream Job Ready with Dane Sharp.
G'day Mike, welcome to Dream Job Ready, mate. First things first, how are you?
I'm doing great, Dane. How are you today?
Always good, mate. Sunny skies here, and I'm sure it's sunny in California, right?
It sure is. It's been June gloom has kind of lingered into July, but we're only 2 days in, and the forecast next week looks a little bit better. So it should have some sunny mornings and evenings.
Lovely, mate. Perfect time of year over there. Let's rip into it, mate. Red Bull. Dare say the listener hopefully has pressed play on this purely by seeing your name and the brand that you work for. It's definitely one of the globe's wow brands. Let's talk about, first of all, what you do there now and how you got this dream job.
Yeah, so I'm a producer on the content team, and I'm in the sports group. So basically, we are focused on producing video content, kind of in that short to mid form range around Red Bull's stable of athletes, which, as most people know, are some of the greatest contemporary athletes out there in tons of different sports. So that's kind of we're the sports team under the content team in Red Bull Media House North America.
Perfect. And obviously Red Bull is here to sell and distribute cans of drink. But when it comes to within the business, Red Bull Media House it's a huge priority for the business, right? It obviously is one of the key ways that the company gets its brand and its purpose out there to the people.
Definitely. I mean, even before, decade plus ago, seeing what Red Bull does, I mean, a lot of other brands and people, executives I talk to at other brands, they say, Red Bull's marketing is genius. They have this media house and that is their marketing arm. Sure, they do advertising and traditional stuff like that, but just the fact that they have this media network is super cool. And it's really, I mean, as the media landscape has changed over the last decade, I find myself really thankful because they're really kind of one of the few brands that are kind of telling more in-depth stories. I mean, I think a lot of other brands in this digital era are more kind of following suit, but they were like the OG original, like, hey, we're going to go tell these people stories and call it marketing.
Oh, 100%. And, the quote, content is king is old now. I didn't invent it, unfortunately. But, I think it's a very good point you make. And there's some certain industries that have always committed to this, but a lot of businesses kind of went the other way for a while. They went to sort of buying content or, having others sort of mass produce it. But you're right, like keeping it in-house, keeping control of it, and really investing in it is the other key part. I know they've invested heavily in it. It's not like they've just scrapped off a little bit of spare change every once in a while. They've actually really had a crack at it for over all these years.
Oh, yeah. I mean, it's so scalable, too. Like, I mean, they have a feature films department. They have, somebody doing the TikTok dance or whatever, like there's no kind of stone left unturned. And I just, I always felt like since I started there that it was kind of like an ongoing digital media university almost. Like they're updating you on the newest trends. You're sitting in these, they call them Red Talks instead of TED Talks, and they just really provide a continuing education for their staff and so it's cool to go learn a lot. I mean, I'm not fresh out of college anymore. And when I was in college, there wasn't the classes these kids are taking now. And when it comes to, digital media, and it's just really kind of kept me contemporary. And also like, I don't know, it's exciting just to go to work and know that you have the potential to create the craziest thing you could dream of. I mean, they have a guy jumping out of space. So like, the sky's the limit for, if you can get your idea and sell it and, they know you're passionate about it, there's kind of no limit to the type of content you can create.
And culture is usually driven from top down, and it's a really interesting point. If you could talk a little bit more. So you're saying, if I'm fresh out of school, straight into Red Bull, it's almost as, fantastic and wow as it is if I'm 5, 10 plus years in my career coming to the brand. That's what kind of sensation they make it for starting there, do they?
Yeah, I mean, they when they bring you in, they bring you to like a university type. They school you kind of just, this is how we do things at Red Bull. And I mean, it's interesting. You see like the executives there that are had been there 15 years, and they're just as stoked to go to work every day as the 25-year-old that just got his first job. So it's pretty cool, and it's very infectious and contagious when you're in there. And I don't know if it's people high on energy drink or just the genuine stoke of going to work every day, but it is a pretty cool place to just be there and be around it all.
How did you get your job at Red Bull? And for the listener, how did they get a job at Red Bull?
Yeah, there's a couple different ways. I know like they have a program when you're kind of fresh out of college. They call them, I think they call them musketeers, or student brand ambassadors. They actually like employ kids to be these student marketers on campus, and just have a brand presence on campus, and then they kind of groom them and kind of hook them early and groom them into the next executives. But for me, obviously I have, previous experience with other companies and brands, and before I got to Red Bull, but it was funny the way, the evolution of my role. I spent about 8 years at Surfline, as a managing editor there. And then I took a break and went and traveled for 6 months and came back and was looking for a new job. And I saw a position posted, and it was associate editor adventure. And I was like, well, associate editor seems like kind of a lateral move, maybe even a step down, but it's Red Bull, And I was kind of like, a former colleague at Surfline was working for Red Bull TV at the time. And I kind of hit him up. I was like, hey, is this like something I should be interested in? And he was like, send your resume, like, I'll get you to the right guy. And, kind of, it is good to always kind of have those contacts with, former colleagues and stuff like that. And ended up, what they were really looking for instead of an associate editor was kind of a digital producer. And also, at the time they were doing a lot of editorial. So I was like an editor producer. I owned all the adventure content, which was like, the Red Bull Air Force, the whole skydive team, the base jumpers, the rock climbers, the kayakers, the endurance runners, the triathletes, like kind of that realm of adventure sports, which was nice for me to kind of as a change of pace from surfing. And then, so I was doing that. I was providing content to the Red Bulletin, which is their magazine. I was kind of being brought in and groomed to produce like larger video projects. I was working with writers and photographers, and also like the activations team to like, when they have these athlete activations. So there was a lot to manage, and it would be way more than calling it an associate editor position. But like I said, it was great to get in there. And then since then, they had a few reorgs. My role evolved and grew. And I don't know if you want me to keep going down that road.
Please do, mate. Because I know that it's not linear. And that's the key part of this whole podcast, is to prove that, for most people, a dream job just doesn't wake up and slap you in the face and boom, you've got it. It's chop and change, up and down, left and right. So yeah, carry on, mate.
Okay, cool. Yeah. So yeah, I really love doing the adventure stuff, and it got to the point where like, I was getting to do these bigger video projects, and that's it was funny to answer your original question, how I got the job was you go in, for a couple phone calls, they make sure that you're interested, resume, all that stuff. And then you go in there and you're like, wow, you're going to the Red Bull HQ in Santa Monica. And there's 3 giant buildings. Okay, park here, go through there, call me there, like full on. It was just like, it's pretty impressive. And go to this conference room and interview with like 4 different people, the managing editor, the executive producer, the director of digital, like boom, 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 like a 4-hour interview process. And before that, they were like, hey, we want you to do a case study. And I was like, wow, okay, this is like probably the like most work I've had to do just to like get in the door with a job. And I was like, but I'm going to take it serious. Like, this is a great opportunity. And I ended up doing a case study about one of their kayakers and kind of conceptualized a project for him and how I saw it playing out across the media network. And just using my previous experience in media, it was, I am observing how the Red Bull way, I was able to kind of put together a pretty decent case study. And actually one of the people I interviewed with was like, that was the best case study we've ever seen from an applicant. I was like, okay, so you leave the interview feeling a little bit confident after that. But anyway, got the job. A couple years went by. They did a giant reorg of the media house, shifted some things around because they kind of had social media people doing social content, but also like we had to contribute to. So it was kind of just, they got to get it in line with their global HQ in Austria too for workflow. Anyway, long story short, big reorg. I ended up on the content team, thankfully, as opposed to the programming team, and was able to just ideate, create, produce, and kind of the path became clear, and I was able to kind of end up where they asked me where I wanted to go in my interview. Like, where do you see yourself in a few years with Red Bull? I said, I'd really like to be a producer. And from interviewing for an associate editor position and 3 short years later, you're a producer, it was pretty cool.
Oh, that's awesome. And it's always difficult to kind of know where you're going to end up in some of those business reorgs. Very fortunate that you got the opportunity to.
And so you can get cut too. Like, there was some colleagues that didn't make the reorg, It is scary, but, at the end of the day, it's like you kind of just are confident in yourself. What the work you've done, and, sometimes it doesn't go your way, but there were some nervous times there for a little bit when, you hear all the murmurings and the hall chatter. But yeah, I ended up on the good side of the reorg and it worked out.
Oh, that's gold, mate. And I know you've enjoyed your time there. And just a quick anecdote back to starting there, because even for you, you had a few roles before, obviously with some great companies, but Red Bull's a big deal. It's a big business. So all of a sudden, I don't know, 2 or 3 interviews turns into 5 or 6, obviously, with an organization like this. And they also do it because there's so much demand, so they're weeding some people out. So just talk about your mindset going into, I guess, that rigor that you had, if you can remember back to then, because there's people going through it now for different companies, shapes and sizes. How did you approach it, and how did you approach it with that enthusiasm that obviously kept you proceeding through the process?
Yeah, I mean, I was fortunate that I had a recommendation from someone on the inside. And, they always say it's not what you know, it's who you know. And I don't always agree with that, because I don't feel like that's always fair, but it definitely doesn't hurt. A guy that I worked with at Surfline, like I said, he was there, and he went to my potential boss and was like, hey, this guy knows his stuff. You should hire this guy. Like, basically, he just like put his word on the line for me. And so I went in with a little bit of confidence just based on that fact. But at the same time, I was a little bit nervous because my background was in surfing only. And, and the surf world can be pretty narrow. And for my career, I was trying to grow. And this is the point where surfing kind of was going more mainstream. It was getting classified as an adventure sport. And then you see it in Outside Magazine and all these places. So I was kind of like, this is my growth, like surfing. I love surfing. I'll always be a surfer, but to grow in your career, you need to expand and kind of go to a broader audience or more sports and things like that. So I was a little nervous that I wasn't like an editor at Outside Magazine going in and out. I was like, I know these sports, I participate in them, but like my background says surfing. So I was a little nervous there, but I don't know. I felt like I had observed Red Bull as just a media consumer for so long that I was like, okay, I don't entirely know how they work, but I'm confident in the content they produce. So it is kind of obviously being very familiar with the person or the brand who you're interviewing with. I mean, do all your research, things like that. That was kind of gave me more confident. And then just be yourself once you're in the room. It's like you're in a closed door with one other person. Like, there's nothing really else to do, but I don't know. I always wear my heart on my sleeve, and, obviously you got to be respectful and can always read the person too a little bit when you're sitting down. But I just always try and just be myself. And if the interview goes two ways, you know, it's like if they say something that doesn't mesh well with you, maybe it isn't the role for you, you know, but luckily it was, and I got the job.
Yeah, that's good, mate. And I definitely agree. You got to be yourself, because you won't be happy otherwise. If you fake it in that interview and then you get in there, you're exactly right. It's going to disappoint you. Mate, just a really quick one, because I think this is really topical for a lot of people. You took some time off and then went for this role. And then to your point, you came from the same industries. Obviously, Red Bull knows Surfline, and you've been well aware of, would have been well aware of Red Bull during your time there. Did they, one, ask you about your time off during the interview process? Did that come up, if you remember? And secondly, did they sort of ask you about the fact that you'd been in surf, almost specifically, and were you ready for that change? Did those two questions come up?
Yeah, they did. I think I kind of volunteered the first one because I was a little self-conscious on a 6-month gap in my resume, but I kind of spun it into, I was adventuring around Southeast Asia, you know, which is true. You're going kayaking and you're riding mountain bikes and you're doing all those things that you can do when you're traveling, you know. And also I was able to, while I was traveling, I was blogging. I had a travel blog going, and so that kind of was like a filler in that resume space, you know, like, hey, I didn't have a formal job, but here's the blog I was doing. There's 20 some posts, you know? So it was I kind of volunteered that, like, here's what I've been up to before they even asked. And then what was the second part of that question?
The second part was around the fact that you, as you mentioned, you pretty much specifically had worked in surf throughout your career. Right. And this was a chance to work for a company that obviously works in surf, but also has a plethora of other activities going on. Did they question whether you were ready for the change, or whether you were a specific surf kind of employee?
I think it may have came up, but I kind of, you know, I had a few in my back pocket where, like, oh, you know, because I freelance too, so it's like, oh, I've done this, I've done that, to where, like, you know, yeah, I'm not an expert, but I'm a participant, and I can edit and I can write and I can tell a good story. And I think with them, like, their big thing is storytelling. Like, if you're a good storyteller, you know, obviously they have a lot of creative people in those halls, and there's a lot of stakeholders on these projects too, to where, like, you know, you'll get vetted out pretty quick if you're not really going down the right road sooner than later. So I don't think they were too concerned. I think it was more like, this guy has the chops. He knows how to tell a good story. His editing skills are on point. Like, it was kind of like they felt confident in me. But they also, the way they started me, actually, now that I remember, it's interesting. They were like, okay, we're going to start you on a retainer. And you're gonna be responsible to do this many stories a week. This is what we're gonna do. Like, you get, you know, you're not gonna be an employee. You are. So they basically, it was like a trial run from September, October, November, and then December came, and they're like, okay, you're in. So it was like, you know, getting to know someone, and, like, you know, it wasn't like going to Vegas and getting married or anything, you know.
Mate, and I think, you know, the underlying part of that as well is you obviously went in prepared, which I think is a key thing for any listener to think about. And you know, a couple of my previous guests have really talked to both preparedness and making sure that you're going into the interview, you know, knowing about yourself, knowing, you know, why you're standing there in that interview in the first place, but also, you know, having the chops to have tested or tried out the product or the, you know, the platform or the company you're working for. So I think in those 2 points, for anyone listening that has had a bit of time off, be prepared to talk about it and have, you know, whether that's get on the front foot and talk about it, or hedge your bets and wait to be asked about it, but obviously know how you're going to handle that.
Have an answer for sure.
Yeah. And I think it sounds like as well, you know, you kind of addressed, hey, I'm surf, but here I go into a slightly different role. So you're probably preparing for that. And I think that's crucial no matter what job or industry you're in. If you're changing and leaping to a different field or a different job or a different industry, know the why and the how, and I guess why you're ready for it as well. Yeah.
But yeah, I think also, like, and interviewers want to know that you want to grow. You know, I framed it like, hey, this is me expanding. This is me growing. This is me kind of going into different fields that I previously haven't had, and that's a goal in my career. And I think they like to see, you know, goal-oriented employees. You know, like I said, when they interviewed me, they were like, "Where, if you got this job, where would you like to end up at Red Bull?" And I said, "I'd like to be a producer for sports content," and that's where I'm at right now. So
Yeah, it's nice, mate. All right, this is your chance to froth me and the listener out. You know, tell us most recently, what are some of the cool events, initiatives, athletes you're getting to work with?
oh gosh. Oh man, there's been so many. There, like, it's so cool because there's like, when a project comes up, it's like there's a snowboarder, John Jackson, you know, there's an endurance mountain bike, Jill Kittner, you know, there's Dane Jackson running his kayaks off waterfalls. Now you're going to, you know, Lake Tahoe with the skydive team, and they're going to jump over the lake. And like, I mean, it's, everything's different. Every project's like totally different. And that was really, really fulfilling coming from the surf world. As you know, it's so cyclical, and then you go to pipeline, and then you're back at snapper, and like, it's so predictable. I feel like the surf world is not predictable, but also like the same thing happens every year except for different outcomes, you know? So it was a real big breath of fresh air. I would say, as far as like, probably the coolest project I had was that Lake Tahoe experience with the Red Bull skydive team. They did what they call a barge boogie, and they pull two barges in the middle of Lake Tahoe and have two helicopters just jumping. They bring them up, jump down, and they're like skidding across the water trying to land on like a postage stamp in the middle of the lake. And that day I took a helicopter to work. It was pretty cool. They're like, you can go in, here's the GoPro, like get some B-roll and fly in with the guys. And yeah, you got to take a helicopter to work over Lake Tahoe. That was pretty cool.
That's the magic, mate. Oh, that's so good. It just made me think of one of my favorite moments. You mentioned pipeline before. I remember once I got to fly over pipeline for about 20 minutes, I think, in a helicopter doing some filming for the local TV station. You just remind me about
Amazing. That. Everything's better from above.
And just, you know, that must keep you motivated, and even on a down day must get you excited to come in and go, hang on a sec, what are we doing?
Right. And it also is like, it spawns new ideas. You're like, if we just did that, like, what about this? You know? And that's, I think, how Red Bull's able to kind of be on that cutting edge with their content, is just like I said initially, it was like, the sky's the limit. If you can dream it, they can do it, you know?
And how have you kept up with that? You know, obviously internally, they're going to do as much as they can to kind of keep you flowing and keeping pace, or vice versa, helping Red Bull grow, as I'm sure it is as well. But anything outside of work, anything you do to you know, upskill yourself, etc.?
Yeah, I mean, I like to, you know, spend time outdoors. Like, there's so much inspiration out there. I mean, whether it's surfing or hiking, or, you know, challenging yourself in different ways, like, and it's just like, while you're doing those things, it kind of comes to you sometimes. I mean, every now and then you got to just like sit down and like think of 10 ideas, you know? And like, I feel like those ideas aren't always the best, but they're a starting point for like, okay, we should do this. And then you're out surfing the next day and you're like, no, we should do it like that. And, you know, so it's kind of an evolution of just that ideation. And I don't know, I mean, there's a lot of good ideas and good projects in that company that just die on people's desks too, you know? But if they're like, if it's your baby and you're passionate about it and you're the one championing it, they're pretty, and there's budget available, they're pretty like open to like have you, that's your baby, go for it, you know?
That's I mean, that kind of culture and opportunity, it's it's electric. Let's jump back in time, mate. I'm going to jump to our listener question of the week, because this is going to put us a little bit further back in time. This question is from Rachel, and she asks, did your first job, and you can explain what that was, did your first job teach you anything that's still important to you today?
Yeah. Probably that I don't want to be at a desk from 8 till 6. And it was tough, you know, like you at some point you have to do it. But I kind of figured out where my strengths were. And yeah, you know, even what I do now, you have to be at the computer. But I was first job out of college, I moved to I'm originally from Florida, and I, you know, packed up my truck and drove to California, and it's like, all right, here I come, you know, and I ended up getting a sales job at I don't even think the company's still around anymore. They were called Poor Boy, and they did surf skate snow accessories. So it was like leashes, traction, snowboard wax, like things like that. And I was like in-house sales. And they're a struggling company, and I was like, had to pick up the phone every day and just like call these shops, and they're like, who, what? Like, no, like, yeah, send us a catalog. Like, they didn't want to talk to me. And I was just like, it was, I don't want to say it was demoralizing, but it was pretty friggin' tough, man. And I just would just go in there and just like, okay, I'm talking about sports that I love. I know these products. I like trying to convey that enthusiasm, and I had some success, you know, but it was one of those things like, okay, maybe I'm not the best salesman, but it actually got my foot in the door in the industry, where you'd go to the trade shows and you'd start meeting people, networking, and having these contacts that could potentially lead to something bigger. And that's how it happened with Surfline. Like I met the one editor way back when he was a one-man show, Marcus Sanders, and he you know, as they grew, he brought me over and gave me my dream job at Surfline. So it all kind of like, you may not like your first job. I mean, even my wife says she hated her first job. Like, I think coming out of college, you, especially now, like, especially with this economy, is like, if you got an opportunity, take it and swallow your pride and just be a positive person going in and absorb as much as you can. But yeah, it's your first job's not going to be your best job.
No, that's good, mate. And you know, and I think it's a great tip to sort of identify the what you want to or what you don't want to do's in those first roles.
That's how you learn, right?
Yeah, mate. Let's quickly talk about Surfline, because that's, you know, amazing tenure there. Over 9 years, I believe, working for Surfline in a couple of different roles. So, do you want to talk to us quickly, I guess, about, you know, getting that first opportunity and then how you progress through to be the managing editor?
Yeah, so I don't know how much you guys are mostly Aussies listening probably, but Surfline's obviously the biggest surfing website in the US. They have all the camera networks and surf news. And it was founded by Sean Collins, who kind of pioneered surf forecasting. And they had, previous to when I got there, they had partnerships with Surfing Magazine, and they were doing kind of some editorial partnerships. And then I think the magazine group started their own forecasting site, and Sean Collins said, oh, hell no, we're doing our own editorial. And that's where Marcus Sanders came in. And he was the lone guy just doing it all. And then, you know, Surfline's traffic grew, and the appetite grew for content, just on online content as well. And kind of those like late 2000s, you know, like kind of that mid 2005-ish kind of zone, like people were like consuming a lot of content online. And, you know, Marcus was like, I had met Marcus through, you know, my previous job, and I kind of I always like loved writing and loved storytelling and wanted to, you know, write about surfing, reading all those, you know, the great surf journos growing up. And he started just throwing me little work, like, hey, there's a little 1-star contest in Newport. Like, we'll pay you $100. Like, go down there and write a story. I'm like, cool. He's like, hey, did you watch the women? We'll give you another 100 for the women. I'm like, yeah, like $200 on a weekend. Woo. And just kind of got in there and just paid my dues, like, you know, and then like, as it grew, the budgets grew. And then, you know, he's like, I was actually working with the U.S. surf team at Surfing America at the time. I believe they're called USA Surfing now, but the junior team. And that was actually a pretty fortunate role, because I could be a journo on the side and still go work with the best kids, the Kolohe, Connor, you know, all the top amateurs, and have those relationships to this day with those kids. So I was doing both, and, you know, they brought me on as an assistant editor, I believe the first title was, and it was like, you know, it wasn't full time, but I was contributing and learning too. And then as that kind of, Surfline just kept growing and kept growing, and it got to the point where it was like, I was all in, sorry to the nonprofit, but, wish you guys well. And then we went through a really cool time, at Surfline where we had, I don't know if people are familiar with Flash, but it's a web development like Flash software. And we had a really good Flash designer, and he could just go, it was one of those things, like you can dream it and you can do it. You're like, okay, we got Rob Machado and he's got all his quiver out. And if I mouse over this board, it lights up and you click on it and it pops up, it gives the dimensions, and Rob tells you about that board. And like nobody was doing that then except Surfline. And we're like blowing the magazines away because it was like a new multimedia storytelling way to tell stories. And it was really cool until Apple released the iPad. And then Flash went away. And anyway, then we kind of had to, to change strategy and stuff like that. But I had kind of many roles. Like, so I was associate editor. I did, they were trying to, in every job, and it happens at Red Bull, the company shifts their priorities or their focus or what they want to focus on. They're like, okay, we want to be the travel destination. We want surf spot descriptions all over the world. Mike, you're the travel editor, so you're like, okay, cool. Like, you're like writing thousands of spot descriptions all over the world. And like, yeah, maybe I get to travel to a few of them too. But, and then it got to the point where it was like, okay, now you're the managing editor, and we have a photo editor. We have an art director. We have a video, editor. Like the team just kept growing. And I was, like I said, I was their second editorial employee. They had Marcus and me. And then by the time I left, there was probably a team of 9 in the editorial staff, which was pretty cool. But Marcus is still there. And, I hit my glass ceiling, and you kind of realize that at the same time too. And it was a dream job when you're in your like late 20s and you're getting paid to travel all around the world with the best surfers and tell stories about it, like, and surf yourself. So that was definitely a dream job for that time in my life. And I'll always kind of remember those memories, and I'm thankful to Surfline for always kind of giving me that opportunity and still giving me a free membership to this day.
Yeah, let's shout out as well. No, I think, and I think the fact that you've been on the pulse, I think with the industries, with a couple of those roles has been awesome for you, and has been kind of that perfect sort of realm of dream job. I remember Surfline was doing such cool things, throughout your time there. But as you mentioned, a couple of really cool things online, etc. And then obviously right now, when it comes to content production, you're on the pulse with Red Bull. The question I want to ask you, and you mentioned companies change focus. I'd love to wrap this episode up with one thing I really think is an interesting question for someone that's forging their career and powering on in a similar industry and workforce that you are. Like, where are we going next? What excites you about the next couple of years? Let's not go too far ahead, but what's got you pumped up about the next couple of years, specifically around sports production, content production?
I think it's really hard now because there's so much social media, and that's where people get their news. And not to take anything away from social media, but like you really have to, and this is one thing that Red Bull kind of really, really taught us, is that you have to think about platform specific content. Like, is like some people are like we observe some brands or some people, they get the one piece of content and they go, I'm going to put that on Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, everywhere, the same piece. And it's like, that doesn't engage your audience. So I think it's really, people are really starting to study the audiences on each platform and try and create platform specific content. And a lot of people are doing that right now. Where it goes from here is, I don't know. I think it's going to be, see what the next Instagram is, I think we don't know yet, but we kind of are open to anything right now, I feel like, just as consumers and as, people who consume content. But for me, it's just like, I've always just been fortunate enough to be in these positions where it's like, if you can dream it, you can do it. And if you can just, there's no bad ideas. and every idea you have isn't going to be the best one, but like don't be afraid to kind of put yourself out there and yeah, and have people say no or be like, no, that's not a good idea, but it's an idea. As long as you have some new, fresh ideas always, I think that kind of will carry you to whatever's next. Like I said, if I would have known Instagram would have been what it is 10 years ago, like I would have gone and worked for them probably.
I was going to say, hot tip for the listener, keep an eye on your LinkedIn as well, mate. See what's coming. Hey, Mike, I really appreciate your time, mate. Been so good. Awesome career you've had, couple of dream jobs, and I'm sure there's a couple more before you retire and surf your brains out somewhere on a private island.
Thanks, Dane. Yeah, it's been great to talk to you. And, I just thanks everyone for listening. And just follow your dreams. That's actually one thing that Sean Collins, the founder of Surfline, his main slogan was follow your passion. And when I first started at Surfline, I would make the time every time I was in the office and Sean was there, because Sean usually was gone chasing a swell. But I would walk into his office and say, hey, Sean, how's it going? Get 10 minutes of the man's time and you learn so much. And his slogan of follow your passion is something that's stuck with me to this day. And I just encourage everyone to do that. So
love it, Mike. Thanks, mate. Follow your passion.
Right. Thanks, guys.